Hi, so how do you design a career and a life that works for you? So that's what we're going to chat about today, and how you can be more intentional in order to have the career you want and not putting more efforts, but be again more strategic, more intentional, more purposeful. So thank you for being here today. My name is Peggy Van de Plage. You can check out my website, peggyvandeplage.com, if you want to learn more about me. So I came to develop this newsletter, this podcast, the topic, because it's a topic actually I'm talking about a lot. I was like, considering that I have a lot of people who want to talk about it, that would be something interesting. So very recently, one of my contacts, someone I've known for like 15 years when I moved to Toronto, reached out to me. So we don't really see each other, but we're just one of these contacts. We like each other, but we're not very close. And she wanted to discuss her career. Usually when people reach out to me out of the blue, it's because they want career advice. That's usually how it works. And she wanted to discuss her career simply because she joined a new bank. She's also in finance. And she joined the bank, maybe a year and a half ago. And she was blindsided by some org change, which we know happens quite often. She was not delighted by some of the personal relationship. She had, or should I say, professional relationship with some of the people she was working with, and like she was again contemplating leaving, and also living without necessarily having found a job. So we stayed on the phone for only 20 minutes, but I think that was enough for me to convey a few messages. First, the fact that, wow, if you're in Canada, the job market is not great. So leaving a job without having another job, probably not a great idea, especially if you're working in a good organization, which is our case. And also living over interpersonal challenges, it's not really worth it because people rotate so much in this type of organization. So yes, it's a pain in the butt, like I worked with people who are very unpleasant but also in my team, you can also have people who are difficult to manage, even if they're supposedly working for you. But I came to that conclusion, unless obviously it's very detrimental to your mental health and physical health, which is another issue. But if it's just like, people who you are not enjoying working and who are difficult, you're better off working through the interpersonal challenges than actually leaving your job. And the last thing, I was pretty clear with her, she's a woman of a certain age, let's put it that way, is that ageism and sexism is still very prevalent on the market. We're not talking about it, but that is the reality. So in 20 minutes, she quickly understood that, okay, maybe she should change perspective on her job, have a conversation with the person that was difficult to work with, but stay where she was. So I was, not that I was happy that she followed my guidance. That's not what I meant, but I was happy that I had been able to give her information that she could then, integrate and process and make her own decision. And that's what I mean by being intentional. Very often, you can end up in a situation where you make a very rash decision, and that comes to haunt you. So I've made a lot of strategic mistakes in my career, but I actually also chosen very strategically. And I think it's very important to think about how do you shape your professional journey with intention. So I'll use myself as an example because I think it's going to resonate quite a bit. So growing up when it was tight, maybe you read my book and you know that about my background. So it made my decision very simple. I would study and I would work in a field that was financially rewarding because I didn't want to put myself through that anymore. And so, I picked finance. Yes, I did take student loans to be able to finance my education, my business school in France, but I knew I would be able to pay them off, and that is one of the first conversations I'm having today with parents, with youth, is you need to calculate the net present value of your education. And what I mean by that is that will your career allow you to actually repay your student loans in a reasonable amount of time? Will that career that you're going to study for, or that maybe you're considering doing additional study, will support the lifestyle you aspire to? And, of course, if you're coming from money, your parents are supportive, well, this is an irrelevant conversation. Good for you, that's fabulous. But for most of us, it is not. So if you're considering, or if your child is considering taking on $75,000 of student loans to study fine arts, I don't know. I don't think it's a very wise decision. Yes, of course, there is always someone who knows someone who has made it, but how many others are still really struggling, juggling with debts, decades later? You don't want to have free jobs just to pay back your student loans. Doesn't really make sense to me. And you also need to start building your asset base at some point. So is it unfair? Yes, it is unfair, but it's reality. We're not in a Pollyanna world. So I think that's the first thing really when you're looking at designing your career is, okay, what field are you going to go and work in? And that's something I explored very early in my career. I worked in multiple industries, and I very, very quickly realized that some industries, financial services, consulting, technology, they had higher margins. They have more corporate infrastructure, so more opportunities for jobs and senior jobs. So it was overall better growth opportunities. Also, they happen to be located downtown, so you don't have to commute in the boonies and have to eat your lunch at the cafeteria because there is no option. And also, it was a better cultural fit for me. So this is where I zoomed in. I did work in manufacture. I did work in other industries, but I realized that it would not be the industries that would be supporting my career in the best possible way. And that's something I really want to be clear. You can spend the same amount of time and energy in a low-paying, stagnant industry as you would in a thriving, dynamic one. So it will not require less work to work in manufacture versus working in financial services, but it will be less rewarding. So that's something you want to think of. And maybe you're already shifting into your seat because you're like, well, what about purpose? What about vocation? What about passion? And I would say, sure, but you can find just as much passion in a human resources role in financial services as in a human resources role in manufacturing, but you'll be better compensated. Again, you can find as much purpose in law as in human resources. And again, you'll be better compensated. And again, let's be honest, you will have multiple careers in your lifetime. So your passion will also ebb and flow. What you're so passionate about now, you might not be as passionate tomorrow, especially if you realize that it doesn't really pay the bill and you have to really have a different standard of living than the one you were aspiring to. Another thing I paid attention, especially at the beginning of my career, above and beyond the field, as I mentioned, finance, the industry, consulting, technology, financial services, I also look at geography. So I started my life in a small French town, not exactly the next economic boom. So I moved to Montreal. Then a few years later, I realized that guess what? In financial services and in other services, actually, you're better off being in Toronto. At least it was the case for me. So I made that change. At the time, I was working at CGI, which I really love, which is a tech company. But I also realized that as a finance person, there were not a lot of senior positions I could have. So I went to Bank of Montreal. So that is what I mean by being strategic. It's really understanding what are the industries that are going to support you, what are the organizations that are going to be able to support you, what type of field of activities, what type of geography, and be very clear about that. And I always loved optionality. For me, that's one of the best strategies I've ever followed, is building optionality. So for me, that meant collecting as many passports as I could. You can call it passports, you can call it a permanent resident, or, like work visa, things like that, but having a lot of options when I have to change geography. The second, it's gaining experience that was globally recognized. So if I change geography, I can explain what I've done. People understand, they know the companies. Same thing for my education. I did a very good business school in France. Outside France, not many people know that. So what did I do? I studied for the CFA, which is globally recognized. And that also stemmed from my experience when I came to Canada. The first questions were always the same. What are your Canadian diplomas and what is your Canadian experience? And I swore that I would never, ever get caught in that position again. Hence the diversification of my credentials, hence working in very large organizations that are known and respected globally. And so my work experience now spans very generalist, but also very specialist roles across regions and across sectors. And I design it that way because I can be a specialist for someone, but I can be a generalist for someone else. I can be working in private equity, but I can also be working directly in technology. So it's all these things you want to make sure, to increase your employability and to maximize your return on your investment. Whether you're working, once again, 50 hours a week, doesn't matter the number of hours, in a career that is low reward, in a place that is going down, or you're working the same amount of time with the same amount of energy in a booming geography and in a very supportive industry, it's the same for you. It's just that the rewards are going to be very, very different. And you need to think about it. You need to design your career like that, not just follow, and maybe, okay, great, you were lucky with the first job and you just stayed there. But I don't think this is enough now. You really, really want to be strategic. And if that's something I spoke about it in my book, and it's something that I really believe is always surfing the next big wave. And right now, as you know, I'm in Canada, I'm in Toronto, and as I look really at the doom and gloom, sentiment in the economic landscape and also the job market, obviously, well, I'm leaning into the Middle East. I mean, the Emirates, to be precise, so Abu Dhabi, Dubai. And it's really understanding that the tide lift all the boats, but the reverse is true. If you are in a place that is going down, well, you know what? It might be difficult for you to, one, keep your job, but also continue moving up, continue enjoying. You're not going to have a vibrant ecosystem and energy around you when everyone is retreating and people are just thinking about surviving. And that is unfortunately the situation that is happening here. So I'm looking elsewhere. That's as simple as that. And you might think that it's not working for you because you have too much complexity, but it's not true. Plenty of people do that, whether they have children, whether they don't have children, whether they're married, whether they're not married, whether they speak plenty of foreign languages or not. If you're listening to that, that means you obviously speak English. Well, that's enough. You're one of the lucky people who can leverage that, and you can go work pretty much anywhere in the world speaking only English. So that is good enough. And then eventually you can learn another language if you want. Another point I want to make is, okay, you want to be strategic, you want to be intentional, you want to be purposeful, but that doesn't mean being transactional. And I'm really, and I spoke a few times about that, but I'm personally really turned off by this very mercenary approach that I see a lot in North America. Like this trend of only engaging with relationship communities for personal gain. I really find it very disgraceful. Like it's very different to choose to be in the right city, in the right country, in the right industry, the right organization, like that makes sense. It's rational. But joining a tennis club, a charity board just to mine the network, that's not okay, like, and okay, of course, over time, you will build genuine friendship, you will build trust, you will build opportunities. That's going to be something that you're going to be able to potentially benefit from in your career. But that was not the goal, like treating people like stepping stones, it is not the goal. And that's really something I want to be clear. This is not what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm really talking about, being strategic with your career. I'm not using people as tools, as marks for your career. So as I want to finish, like there is that opportunity again to design a life, a career that works for you. There are countless ways where you can improve your station in life by being intentional, strategic, purposeful. Yes, it will mean stepping outside your comfort zone. That's for sure. You cannot improve your station in life if you're not stepping outside your comfort zone. That seems obvious. But in the long run, it is less risky and it is more rewarding than actually just staying where you are. Just staying where you are is usually actually the risky bet. We don't necessarily see that, but and that's something you can think of. So if I look at my mom, for example, in her late 60s, she left a town in the north of France with not a so great weather for a small village in the south of France. So she sold her condo. She bought a bigger, better condo over there for less, obviously, large town, yeah, kind of actually, small village. The cost of living dropped as well. She gained better weather, and boom, she get an instant upgrade. And she didn't have to invest for that, actually, like she upgraded her life with the same fixed pension. She just changed the circumstances around her. It might seem overwhelming, but it's a calculation, it's a choice, and it's also something I want to talk about quickly regarding studies. So today you have a lot of opportunities. I don't know if you're from an Italian background, it's not that complicated, to get the citizenships. So if you're Canadian or Americans and you're getting the Italian citizenship, well, that means you can go and study in Europe, and Europe studies are way less expensive than North American. If you are a Canadian living in the US, well, you can study in Canada. It's going to be less expensive as well. So there are a lot of things that can be looked at in order to reach goals that might look inaccessible. But you just have, again, to be a bit more, not just strategic, maybe scrappy, but also put yourself outside your comfort zone. I think that's something that's really, really important. So again, if my mother did it at 67, I think you can do it as well. So thank you so much for listening. I hope that would have, sparked good ideas for you and give you some intel on how you could improve your career and your life without necessarily working more, working harder, hustling, which is actually, unfortunately, the only way we're told we can improve our life and career. So thank you so much for watching, listening, and talk to you next week. Bye-bye.